Today I'm going to tell you why the Canon 60D is the best option for 2020. Alright, this is the third time I've made a video about the Canon 60D going into a new year, and I still stand firm that the Canon 60D is the best camera going into this year. Now obviously you have to pay attention to price and kind of your own standards, so if you're somebody who wants to buy a Canon 5D Mark IV or a Sony a7R IV, you know, those cameras are very high-end and that's not what we're talking about here. So when talking about affordable cameras for 2020, the Canon 60D is the best option. So going into 2020, the Canon 60D is going to be 10 years old. Now hearing that, a lot of people will think they can't shoot on a 10-year-old camera because it'll be out of date or the quality won't be good enough. Well, the 60D is definitely good enough for 2020. It's about the same as last year. YouTube hasn't shifted over to 4K as the standard, so 1920 by 1080 video is still great, which the Canon 60D shoots. And for photography, there's really no reason you can't shoot with the Canon 60D. I've been shooting with the Canon 60D for almost 3 years now, and it's great. I plan on sticking with it all the way through 2020 for wedding films, making videos for local businesses, and making my own YouTube videos all year. It shoots 1920 by 1080 up to 30 frames per second. It shoots 18 megapixel photos, and you can do raw photos. Another benefit to the camera is that it has a flip out LCD. So if you're somebody looking to do YouTube videos, it's really great because you can see yourself in the viewfinder right to the side. Can the 60D compete with better cameras? Well, the short answer is yes. So there's better cameras out there than the 60D, obviously spec-wise. There's cameras that are shooting 4K at 120 frames per second or 60 frames per second, and there's cameras that have way higher megapixels and better autofocus. But the Canon 60D can compete with these cameras pretty dang well. So all the videos I've shot or all the photos I've taken are taken on the Canon 60D, and I think it competes with other high quality wedding films or videos you see out there. The quality isn't an issue at all, you just have to pair the camera with the right gear. And the nice thing compared to these other cameras, it competes very well in price because it's way more affordable than a lot of high-end cameras right now, and you're still gonna get great results. Here are just the current prices on eBay and Amazon as of the time I'm filming this video. And if you are interested in buying the Canon 60D, I have a link to the camera below. So if you already have the Canon 60D and the reason you're watching this video is because you're considering upgrading, I would just personally say stick with the camera body for this year and focus on ways you can improve with the camera or different gear you can get to get better with the camera. So I have a few tips if you're shooting with the Canon 60D in 2020 to just help you get started. I suggest if you're shooting with the 60D in 2020, you invest in a piece of gear you don't already have. This is the best way you're going to subtly improve your photography or videos without breaking the bank. So since you are staying with a more affordable camera body than, say, going out and buying a different camera that costs more, I suggest you take the opportunity with the money you save to buy a new lens, a new mic, or something even smaller like say an ND filter or that extra memory card you need. So try to look for something that will help bring your photography or video making skills up a notch without having to break the bank. So next, I think you should try a new photography or filmmaking idea. So for example, if you take a lot of portraits with the 60D, but you don't really do a lot of landscape photos, I suggest you go out and try taking some landscape photos. The same with filmmaking is, say you're used to shooting indoors, maybe try going and shooting outdoors for once. This is a great way to just get more familiar with the camera and improve your actual skills with the camera. That way you're actually getting better with it without having to change your camera body. Even looking at my review of this camera in 2018, the quality of the video is way worse, but that's not because of the camera, it's because of my own skill. This is the same camera body with the same lens. It's the Canon 60D with a 50mm 1.8. The main thing that's changed over these few years is I've actually gotten better with the camera. So that's definitely one of the main things I want to point out is you don't need to go out and spend a lot of money on a crazy nice camera body, because if you just focus on getting good with the Canon 60D, it's going to be more than capable of getting you started with photography and making videos. So I have videos about how to take better photos with the Canon 60D and how to make better videos with it. So if you are looking to actually improve with the camera, go ahead and check those videos out on my channel. but they'll also be linked down below. Here are some pros of the Canon 60D. It's great for photography, so it's an 18 megapixel camera, and here are a few examples of photos I've taken with it. The 60D is also great for making YouTube videos. Like I said, the flip out LCD is really nice. And for example, talking headshots like this, it works great. If you just pair it with the right lens, the right mic, and some good lights, it's gonna work great. The camera has good image quality, shooting 1920 by 1080. And lastly, it's great for professional work. So I think the Canon 60D especially is great for getting started with a photography or filmmaking business. I've personally done this over the last 2 years with the Canon 60D, and have used it to build my own freelance videography business. So I definitely suggest the Canon 60D if you're looking to start getting paid with photos or making videos. So real quickly, I'll also go over the cons, because clearly the Canon 60D isn't a perfect camera. So it only shoots video at up to 30 frames per second for 1080p. So you can shoot 60 frames per second at 720p quality, but 720p just really isn't what I like to shoot at. I like to stay at 1080p no matter what for my projects. And 30 frames per second allows you to slow down the footage a little bit, but it doesn't allow you to get real nice slow motion like 60 or 120 frames per second. The camera really lacks in-camera stabilization, so shooting handheld can be a little bit shaky. So depending on the lens you're shooting with, it may have image stabilization, but for the most part, I try to shoot on either a tripod with the Ronin S stabilizer, or I end up shooting handheld, keeping the camera pretty close to my body. And lastly, it only shoots at 1080p, and right now that's still the standard, so it's not really a drawback right now, but I still anticipate that going forward, 1080p is soon going to go out of date, so maybe in 2021 or 2022, 4K will be the standard, and this camera will eventually be outdated. Speaking of the gear you should get for the Canon 60D, here are my suggestions if you are a photographer using the Canon 60D. I think you should have a 50mm 1.8 if you're shooting with this camera. I think it's almost a must with any camera, but especially the 60D. I think you need an ND filter, especially if you shoot nature photography or anything outside. Get a nice tripod, that way you have stable lockdown shots and you can get a different variety of photos. And lastly, I suggest you invest in a good light if you shoot indoors. This is going to be more important than just buying a more expensive camera body that does a little bit better in low light. And here's the gear I suggest if you're making videos or if you're a filmmaker. I suggest you get a 50mm 1.8 as well. This is a great lens for cinematic footage, a Ronin S or the Zhiyun Crane 2. So for stabilization, I use the Ronin S, which works amazing, but I've also used the Zhiyun Crane 2, which works great as well. I suggest you get an ND filter for shooting outside, just like with photography. I suggest you get a cheap but good shotgun mic. And lastly, I think you should get a good tripod and light, again, if you're shooting YouTube videos. For example, this setup here, I have my camera on a tripod and a few lights to make my scene just look better. All right, and that's all I have to say about the Canon 60D for 2020. If you're on the fence about it, I suggest you just go out and buy it, and if you already have it, definitely start shooting with it. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I post weekly videos on filmmaking and photography. And I'll see you guys next week.